Sri Lanka, which was South Asia's best economic model for many decades, is today facing its worst economic crisis since independence. It was an economy which could control its population. It could have a high women literacy, strong healthcare system. And then came the civil war, which definitely ravaged the country's economy. They came out of the civil war in 2009 after the defeat of the LTT and the killing of Prabhakaran. There was a sense of euphoria in Sri Lanka. There was a boom in the economy. The Chinese put in a lot of money. The others also put in a lot of money in Sri Lanka, and the tourism also picked up in Sri Lanka. In 2019, we saw how the Gotabaya Rajapaksas got back to power. Mahinda Rajapaksa remained the Prime Minister, and Gotabaya Rajapaksa, his brother, who was earlier the Defense Secretary, credited, quote-unquote, with defeating the LTT, became the President. And his other brothers were also brought in power. There is an estimate that almost 38 people of the Rajapaksa family are holding various posts in this government. So firstly, he made a blunder with the tax, concessions, which did not help the revenue collections of Sri Lanka. Then there was a COVID, and Sri Lanka took quite a bit of time to handle the COVID. The situation was precarious. The healthcare could not handle it. The COVID had its impact. Sri Lanka had suffered in the first wave also in 2020 and in 2021 as well. And it took huge efforts and time to reopen the economy. Meanwhile, they have incurred a lot of international debt. Even by this year, Sri Lanka has to repay 7 billion debt. Over and above that, the Sri Lankan government was unable to repay the loans for the Chinese project, and the assets had to be handed over to China, which is the case in Hambantota. The farming was another big, mainstay of the Sri Lankan economy. But suddenly, the Rajapaksa brothers introduced the organic farming. And the organic farming actually ravaged the traditional farming in Sri Lanka. Then they had to get some fertilizers from abroad for organic farming. And the fertilizer consignment from China was damaged, and it was returned back, and India had to come to the rescue of supplying fertilizers around last September, October. The economic mismanagement was so severe that the current regime hasn't been able to restructure the economy and to manage the economy. And even before they could approach the IMF, they have lost forest reserves to keep as collateral for imports. They have not been able to import medicines. They have not been able to import food grains. This has led to a massive anger in Sri Lanka among the constituencies of the Rajapaksas, which is the nationalist Sinhala constituencies, and also among the farmers. It has snowballed into such a situation that the entire cabinet had to resign. We have to see now whether even they also make way for a new dispensation or not, because there are political parties in the ruling coalition who are calling for a change. In such a situation, you never know. The army and the police may not want to listen to the Rajapaksas, and they might be forced in sort of out in a who knows, in a street coup or something like that. The Maldives have had this experience before. When President Nasheed was actually removed by the police force. It was, of course, the economy was not in this precarious condition, but Sri Lanka is facing its worst crisis, and this is a disaster and a recipe which may for a second civil war in Sri Lanka, and this time it would be among the Sinhalas only. The Tamil Nadu government and the centre is keeping a close eye on this, because India have had experienced this in the past, in the 80s and the 90s, when Tamils from Sri Lanka had virtually crossed over to India. Many of them have gone back, but they did come and stayed in refugee camps in India. It's a big burden for the state government as well to have it. And it also becomes a political issue in Sri Lanka, impacting the Indo-Sri Lankan ties. Silver lining in the process has been Indo-Sri Lankan relations, which received a setback due to the love of the Rajapaksa brothers for China, and China's major encroachment into Sri Lanka has now, in a way, has been a course correction, and India has been able to come to Sri Lanka's rescue in various fields, from vaccines to COVID-19, supplying various raw material to fight the pandemic. And also helping in deferment of payments, and also extended line of credit of 1.5 billion. And overall, India has, since last year, has almost cleared 2.5 billion line of credit to Sri Lanka, which is a soft loan. The only option left for the Rajapaksa brothers, I am naming it them because they are the ones who are, particularly Mahinda Rajapaksa, who's otherwise a very, very shrewd politician, understands the pulse of the people, has been immensely popular at some point of time, but has been keeping unwell also in the last 2 years. The only option left for them is to approach the IMF for a bailout. And there are examples of countries who have taken bailout from IMF but have not been able to. Latin American countries have suffered in the past, and Sri Lanka will be able to manage that IMF restructuring. It is not yet known, but definitely we are in for troubled times, choppy waters, as they say, whether the Bay of Bengal meets the Indian Ocean. Water is very, very choppy in that part of the world, and we are in for some turbulence. So, a politically unstable Sri Lanka is not in India's interest. Sri Lankans in the past have even sailed to Australia from Sri Lanka, which include the Tamils also. So we have to see whether that kind of migration, is also by the seas are also taking place. This is definitely a classic case of economic mismanagement backed by COVID situation, which wrecked in one way the Sri Lankan economy.